Hi, hello, and welcome to Rebel Unicorn Crafts. Today we're going to be exploring some watercolor clouds and specifically looking at a lifting technique for making big fluffy white clouds. The supplies you're going to need for this tutorial are 2 water glasses, one for cleaning your brushes and one for clean water, 140-pound or heavier watercolor paper. I am using 140-pound paper, but 300 works really good for this. I recommend using a smaller piece of paper. I've got a 4x4 piece here, and then you also want to have a test strip. You'll want some masking tape to tape everything down, a watercolor brush. I'm using a size 10. I recommend size 8, 10, or 12. You'll of course want some watercolor. You can choose the colors you'd like to do, pipette, a palette, and some extra paper towels. If you're new to watercolor, the first thing we need to do is tape down our pieces of watercolor paper to a hard board. You can keep your test strip loose. If you've done watercolor a lot, you're already done doing this probably. Go ahead and tape around the edges, probably about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch in all directions, and get it nice and smooth. This tutorial can be done with any colors you'd like. I do find that lifting the blues seems to be easier than some of the other colors like yellow, so keep that in mind, but go ahead and use whatever watercolors you have. I'm going to be mixing up a bit of a blue-green, slightly muted blue color. The colors I am using are a phthalo blue, an ultramarine blue, and then a burnt sienna to kind of tone down that color. Mix up whatever color you'd like, but the only thing you need to do is try to match the opacity of the color that I create, and we'll see that on the test strip. If you're using tube paints, be sure to add them to the side of your palette, not directly in, so you can better control the opacity and water level in there, and test along the way. See how much darker that looks in that paint palette than it actually does on the paper. My color was still too vibrant, so I went ahead and toned it down. And here is the final color that I'm going to be using for my sky, so match that opacity. That means that if you wrote something on the paper behind it, that you'd be able to see it as well as if I did on that. So use whatever colors you'd like. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to actually do a wash. We've done these before, but we want to just make a blue sky wash. So this is where we dip into our paint palette and we get a lot of color and liquid in our brush, and we pull it across the page while holding our hardboard up at a slight angle so that gravity will help encourage all that water to float to that bottom section. You'll see where it dips in. If you'd like to transition the color like I am dipping into some clean water, and I am just barely dipping my brush in. If you wash it too much, it's going to change too drastically, and you'll see even here I got a little bit of a delineation. Now if we were going for a very nice smooth gradient, that would be a big problem, but thankfully because of our lifting exercise, we're actually going to be able to mask some of that. So if you run into that problem, it's okay. Then you want to take your paper towel and rip it, and you want to use those edges that you ripped to dab while this is still wet, so you want to work quickly. If you use the side of the paper towel, often there's a print on it that is going to become kind of embedded into your painting. So if you like that, go for it, but I find that using the ripped edge gives a more natural look. If you don't feel that the lifting has done enough, go ahead, clean your brush, add some fresh water while everything is still wet, and lift again with the side of that paper towel. You could also, if you have a dirty brush and not enough time to wash it, you could kind of dab on with your pipette some of the clean water, re-rip your paper towel and use the edges, and that will encourage more of that pigment in those areas. Think about clouds, how certain areas are more white and certain areas are darker, so maybe concentrate on lifting from certain areas and leaving others alone. I decided to do a second little one with a slightly darker blue just to show you the results of that, but the process is basically the same. You want to be prepared to work quickly. You want to do a wash for the background, lift with the paper towel. If necessary, add additional water to the areas you want to lift while everything is still wet and kind of pliable, and go ahead and lift. You can add additional layers to this too. Just remember that if you do want to add a second layer, it will darken some of the clouds, and also you want to make sure it dries completely between layers. But that's how you paint clouds. So at this point, if you'd like to, you can add a foreground. This is where I do my little mountainscapes, where I mix up my darkest color first, and then I water that down and I add in different layers. I have a different video that goes through all the steps of this in more detail, but here's the finished result after doing these cloud lifting exercises. I love using this watercolor technique because it yields really cool results and it's really simple. So I hope you enjoyed this, and if you do try this, I'd love to see it. You can share your images with me on my Instagrams, either at Lacey Walker Art or at Rebel Unicorn Crafts. I hope that you have a magically creative day.